And I have my son here with me. Say hi, Abdullah. Okay. And so Abu Hamid Muhammad Ghazali, he's known as Hujjat al-Islam, proof of Islam. He, as far as we know, was born and grew up in a town called Ghazala, which is it was a very small town. It no longer exists in the more eastern part of what's modern day Iran. And his father, to the best of our knowledge, was someone who spun yarn. That's what the name Ghazali, it either refers to someone who spins yarn or to the town Ghazala. And it's very possible that town had that name because it was probably famous for spinning yarn. So his father was a yarn spinner and had a great adoration and love for the shuyukh and the ulama and for knowledge. And so he sent Imam Ghazali along with his brother Ahmed and had them under the care of a sheikh, and they eventually went and studied with that sheikh. And there was some money set aside for them. As far as I remember, Imam Ghazali's father had passed away, so Imam Ghazali was basically left under the care of the sheikh. And Imam Ghazali had some, small amount of money there that he was using to, get food and keep himself sustained and that type of thing. And so he studied, from a very early age, memorized Quran, learned the basics of the Deen. And then when he got older, he went to Naysapur, which is a city more in the western side of modern day Iran, and it's quite a travel actually from his hometown of Ghazala. And he went there and studied with some much bigger sheikhs like Imam al-Haramain, who kind of revolutionized usul al-fiqh in the Shafi'i madhab. Imam Ghazali, he became a master in Kalam. He became a master in Shafi'i fiqh, the furu' and the usul of the madhab. And later, Imam al-Haramain, he went and moved to Mecca, Medina, which is why he's called Imam Haramain. And so Imam Ghazali, he studied quite a lot and gained quite a lot of knowledge. People started to know him, recognize him. He started to become famous for his knowledge, and he caught the attention of the Mamluk king, Nizam al-Mulk. Now, I kind of want to do a sidestep here to go over some history. At this time, you had, early Islam, you had the Khulafa Rashideen, and you had, the couple, I guess you could say, caliphates of the Sahaba, and then after that it moved to the Umayyad dynasty. And you had the Umayyad dynasty for a short period, and then the Abbasids, the Abbasiyya, they took over, and you had the Abbasid Caliphate. Now, this period of time when Imam Ghazali lived in the 11th century, the Abbasid Caliphate was only there by name. It really had virtually no political power. And in the area of modern day Iran or Persia, you had a Turkic tribe called the Mamluks, who had swept in really quite quickly and took over that swath of territory all the way over to Baghdad. As far as I understood, they controlled Afghanistan all the way over to Baghdad. And They were big patrons of the Shafi'i madhab, which this was a significant switch in, I guess you could say, the state-sponsored madhabs. In the past, with the Khilafa Abbasiyya, traditionally they had always supported Hanafi jurists. So most like Abu Yusuf, the student of Abu Hanifa, he was appointed judge by the Abbasids. And ever since then, the Abbasid Caliphate has sponsored Hanafi judges and sent them all over the Caliphate, to Egypt and to different places, whether they were really well liked or not. Some places they were not very well liked, but the Caliphate sent them anyways, even over populations that were not Hanafi at all. And I think Egypt is a very good case study in that regard. I mean, there's mostly Maliki, and the Shafi'i madhab started getting some clout, but they still kept sending mostly Hanafi jurists there over the people, to the dismay of the people. And so, when the Mamluks took over and became patrons of the Shafi'i madhab, this was a great shift. Now we have a polity, or Islamic state, so to say, that was sponsoring the Shafi'i madhab. And the Shafi'i madhab at this time had not had state sponsorship really that much before, except by these new Turks that were starting to come in and taking political power in the Muslim lands. And so Imam Ghazali caught the attention of Nizam al-Mulk, who was probably the most prominent governor, wazir, of the Mamluk Empire. And in reality, he was the one who really held political power of the things that were going on in the Mamluk dynasty or kingdom, or whatever you want to call it, their polity. And so Imam Ghazali traveled with him, and I guess was part of his entourage for quite some years from the research that I've done. And I would say that it's pretty evident that I think Imam Ghazali, I could be wrong and people could correct me and give me an argument why, I'm more than happy to listen, but I think that Imam Ghazali and Nizam al-Mulk had become friends. And Nizam al-Mulk, he was a big patron, like I said, of the Shafi'i madhab, but of ilm in general. He loved the ulama. He loved learning himself. Maybe if he was teleported to our time here in America, people would call him Sheikh and make him an Imam. And so what ended up happening is Nizam al-Mulk, he had established quite a lot of madrasas that he funded, and they called them the Madrasa Nizamiya, and he had a bunch of them around the Mamluk Empire. And the most prestigious of them was the Madrasa Nizamiya in Baghdad. And that was like the Harvard or the Yale or the Cambridge or Oxford or Princeton, of their time. That was the number one top university that anybody went to. And effectively, basically, Nizam al-Mulk made Imam Ghazali the dean of this university, put him in the top position there. And Imam Ghazali taught there for quite some time. And Imam Ghazali would gather huge, crowds of people to his lessons. 300 people would come and listen to his lectures at any given time. And Baghdad was the capital of the Khilafa Abbasiyya, even though, like I said, it's only at a face value, superficial. But traditionally, that was the capital. So it was Baghdad at that time was a huge city, a giant population. It maybe you could say it's like New York here in America. Had this big population there and quite a sophisticated city life. And so you had a lot of teachers there of knowledge who made quite good money doing what they did. And Imam Ghazali made a lot of money being the teacher here at Madrasa Nizamiya. And he started to kind of have a mental breakdown or a nervous breakdown in his life, where he started to realize, I'm, a big scholar, or so people think I am. I'm teaching here at this major establishment. I lecture on hours on end about fine, intricate details about the Deen, and yet I feel like a hypocrite. I can't practice the things that I need to practice. I'm not doing what I'm saying. I'm talking the talk, but I'm not walking the walk, so to say. And he had this nervous breakdown. He feared the hellfire. Feared that teaching all this stuff would bring him to the hellfire, because he's not practicing it. He's not being an example to the people. And is what he doing only for fame? Is what he doing only for glory? Only for recognition? Only for sum'ah? So you hear people saying good things about you and the likes. So Imam Ghazali was having this nervous breakdown, and he basically put all his possessions in order, left all of his wealth, all of his money to his wife and children, and took off. He left. Adopted the clothes of the fuqara, of the poor Sufi people, and by Sufi we mean those who adopted the clothing of the suf, the wool, perfected their character, perfected their manners, purified their heart from diseases of the heart, and were masters of actions of the heart. He adopted the clothes of the fuqara, and he left. And he traveled as a poor person. And he realized that the writings of these early Sufi people from the Salaf and early awliya of Allah, they were true. He was skeptical at first about these people. And then he said that the experiential realities or truths from these people is really the only true way to truth. Meaning that you can learn philosophy, which Imam Ghazali was a master of. You can learn Kalam, and you can learn all these different fields of argumentation, but they don't necessarily lead to truth the way experience leads to truth. And ultimately, the path of these people was experiential. And he traveled to Damascus, stayed in the Umayyad Mosque there, in the pillar that is called the Pillar of Umar, and he secluded himself there, where he began to write a book called Ihya Ulum, Revival of the Sciences of the Religion. Okay, so he started writing this giant work, which is a 4-volume work of I believe it's 44 chapters or 40 chapters, and then each chapter is divided into 4 parts, starting with Quran, and then going into Sunnah and Hadith, and then he would go to the sayings of the awliya of Allah and big scholars, and then he would maybe add his own opinion. And this work is his magnum opus, or the giant work of his life. And he traveled to Palestine, he traveled to Mecca and Medina. And eventually, after many years of traveling, he returned to his family and returned to his hometown in eastern Iran, where he created Khanqa, or Zawiya, or Tekka, or whatever you want to call it, their place of learning and tazkiyah and tarbiyah and whatever terminology you want to use, whatever semantics you want to use. And there, to one of his students, is where he wrote the book Ayyuha al-Walad, and this is a risala, and that means in the Arabic language that it's a letter. So this was in the format of a letter being sent to somebody, one of his students, where he talks to him about the reality of this life here on earth. So this book, Ayyuha al-Walad, was a letter that he wrote to one of his students about tazkiyat an-nafs, purifying the ego, purifying the heart, and those types of things. And it's considered a canonical text now. It's taught widely around the world, and it's pretty common. It's really very popular. You can find a bilingual English-Arabic translation available now, and it's highly recommended book. But I highly recommend that people do research into this area, look into this book and other books from Imam al-Ghazali, because he's one of the giant scholars in Islamic history. And the Ihya Ulum, al-Deen, his magnum opus, his giant work there, is the most widely read Islamic book after the Quran and Ahadith. So I highly recommend that you take a look at the works of Imam al-Ghazali. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.